In my last travel video, the aliens had returned me to the bottomless lakes near Roswell, New Mexico, where I next headed northeast up Highway 70. An hour and a half later, I passed through the university city of Portales. And for the first time in several weeks, I saw a familiar sight: dairy cows. But my final destination that day had little to do with cattle and a lot to do with camping as I passed through the gates of the Oasis State Park. This recreational area is only 5 miles north of Portales and just 20 minutes from the Texas border. Should do it. I'm always happier when I see a self-pay station, and Oasis State Park does have a few campsites that are first come first serve, starting at $10 a night. All you do is show up early and pay cash in an envelope. But you do have the option to reserve in advance, and it's definitely recommended. But camping within the trees isn't the only feature here, for within walking distance from all three campsites is the park's namesake, the Oasis. This is a small man-made pond with a walking trail around it. Now, compared to the dense scrubland of the area, I'm sure it's a welcome sight to the locals who come here to picnic or fish. But I was more interested in the natural aspects of the area, so I took a hike on the park's nature trail. Mid-March is a little early for spring colors, however, at least some of the trees were sprouting new leaves, and the birds loved it.
I think this part of New Mexico has a lot of wind, especially in the spring, because I haven't seen a day yet where the wind wasn't blowing, and sometimes it's quite strong. I can see over there, looks like the edge of a front.
Wind is definitely a familiar feature here, as this area was part of the infamous Dust Bowl during the 1930s Depression. The reddish color of the sand suggests that some earlier winds may have blown in from the eroded red sandstone of Arizona and Utah. And there's scatterings of yucca plants just to give a little color.
The trail takes you up some sand dunes. Beyond that, it's scrub brush and cattle pasture.
Now, I have to admit I've seen far more picturesque landscapes in my travels. And a lone cow in the distance doesn't pass as wildlife. But I did see some interesting beetles that seemed to be guarding tunnels nestled in the dunes. What secret stash did they have in there is a mystery to me. As the sun set over my campsite, there were no coyotes howling, just the laughter of children in a nearby playground. In the morning, a herd of deer wandered through the scrub just outside the park boundary. But I didn't come to this place for the scenery or the wildlife. I had another destination in mind and set off early in the day.
Well, this could be really cool. I've made an arrangement to go to the Blackwater Draw near Clovis, New Mexico. Ever since I read Charles C. Mann's book 1491, I've been intrigued by this place. Now I finally get to see it in person.
For those not familiar with Charles C. Mann, let me enlighten you. He wrote a couple of groundbreaking books on the history of the Western Hemisphere, including 1493, about the impact of Europeans on the original inhabitants of the Americas, and the epic 1491, the untold story of what the New World was like before Columbus changed it forever. There are several jaw-dropping revelations in this book which throw in doubt what you were taught in school, and that mankind had existed in the Americas far earlier than most realized. One of the main focus points in the book is a location near Clovis, New Mexico, the place I am entering now. The gate is usually locked, however a phone number is posted to arrange a tour. The Blackwater Draw is a National Historic Landmark and is maintained by the Eastern New Mexico University. Near the entrance is a small visitor center with many items found at the site on display. These include the fossilized bones of animals that went extinct in North America, such as giant sloths, camels, mammoths, and bison antiquus, a larger version of today's American bison. These were all common in the area at the time of the last ice age. Yet nothing shown in a museum compares to seeing ancient relics in the field, exactly where they have laid for millennia. And that's what this tour is about. But first, let me tell you the reason the Blackwater Draw is so special to North American archaeology. That large-scale erosion, although devastating to the farmers in the area, was a blessing to archaeologists as it stripped off the topsoil and exposed what was underneath. About 100 years ago, it was actually pretty common to find mammoth tusks sticking out of the ground in this area. To the locals, this was more of a curiosity than anything else. But to a young, struggling 19-year-old fresh out of high school, it was fascinating. James Whiteman, who was part native, had a passion for Indian folklore and natural history. In 1929, while walking across the sands of the Blackwater Draw, he found something that others had missed. For scattered amongst the ancient bones were human relics. This was the first time that the native peoples of North America could be directly linked to the age of prehistoric mammals. And the original human inhabitants of Clovis, New Mexico had actually been hunting mammoths over 13,000 years ago. Today it's an arid, harsh landscape, but 13,000 years ago, it was a spring-fed pond teeming with animals. Very similar to the man-made oasis found a few miles south today. To the casual observer, you might think this was not an archaeological site, but merely a common gravel pit. And you'd be right, for the truth is, it was a gravel pit, and starting in 1932, this important piece of history was about to be trucked away forever. James Whiteman tried to get the Smithsonian interested in his findings, but they snubbed it. It was only in 1932 he finally caught the curiosity of Edgar Howard, an archaeologist from Pennsylvania, who came out and paid a visit. Edgar saw the significance of the site at once. However, the mining rights of the property have been given to the New Mexico Department of Transportation to supply the gravel in creating Highway 467 between Clovis and Portales. Although large swaths of important archaeological sites were compromised or destroyed, Edgar Howard's team managed to carefully excavate the area alongside bulldozers and gravel trucks that were more than happy to turn it all into concrete. Excavations started in the 1930s and continued well into the 1960s, with several remnants of the digs still visible today. It was the excavations of 1932 to 1936 that uncovered the best evidence of prehistoric men hunting mammoths. As amongst the bones were two spearheads, much larger than later arrowheads, with a distinct style and function to be given a new name, Clovis points. News of the digs soon put Blackwater Draw in Clovis on the map as a world-renowned archaeological sensation. If you want to know what a Clovis point looks like, here's one right here. At the halfway part of the tour, two distinct shelters come into view.
Now there's a well over here. It's supposed to be one of the oldest. What does it say? The oldest well in North America. The sign's a little beat up.
It was discovered in 1964 and was originally dug after a period of drought had dried up the lake bed.
It dates 11,000 years ago.
It's been sheltered and locked to keep out the skunks that kept falling down the hole. But looking through the glass, you can see the uncovered remains of the oldest well in North America. But it's the very plain-looking metal shelter that holds the most surprises, as this is the actual archaeological site that was unearthed at Blackwater Draw many years ago. It's been carefully preserved, with the artifacts remaining in situ since they were first re-exposed to the sunlight after being buried for thousands of years. And it's where the primitive hunters brought their kill for processing. What you see are the skeleton remains of bison and horses. What you don't see are the bison's skulls, as most likely they were moved elsewhere to extract the brains for tanning hides.
This is the real thing. These layers are 10,000, 11,000 years old. And it's the bones left over, mostly from bison and a horse.
Each layer represents a different time period, with the upper stratum dated to 10,000 years ago and the lower 11,000. The kills were likely the result of herding the animals off nearby cliffs, known as buffalo jumps in recent times, to either kill or injure their prey. The mammoths were in a deeper layer, more prominent in other locations at the draw. There is, however, one tusk that has been encased in plaster, still waiting for further study.
Just in its jacket from the excavation.
And how long ago was that excavated?
1964.
Further along the tour is a cliff that gives a good representation of the layers deposited over time, with the reddish layer in the middle where most of the undisturbed artifacts were found. Today's wild animals are evident as well, like these deer tracks in the soft sand. I looked for relics myself in these sands, but only found fragments of what could have been chipped away from the real tools. Still, it was fun exploring. The metal silhouettes of animals long gone were all along the path, but they too were suffering the ravages of time. Even the info placards were peeling away from the searing summer heat. It's a shame that budget cuts have left some of this important site in disrepair. I really hope funding will return to protect this truly unique historic landmark. Arriving back at the Oasis, my thoughts soon turned to food. I had a package of tofu I needed to get rid of before it spoiled, so I fried it up with a little oil. In a separate pot of water, I heated up a package of korma simmer sauce to add a little flavor. The theory was they would both complement each other. However, upon pouring, I had to laugh. Kind of looks like really bad diarrhea, but as long as it tastes good. Well, I got to admit, this experiment of deep-fried tofu and korma sauce didn't go 100% as planned. It had an overwhelming color to it, so I added some fresh tomatoes, make it look a little bit more appealing, but it's because the sauce is so wet. Anyway, what does it taste like? It's very salty, sour, spicy, but it's not too bad. I think it needs a little something else, you know, like maybe some rice or something. I think it's more of a side dish than a full meal, but there's lots of protein here, that's for sure. Have a look. Is it that bad? Here you go. Come on, open up wide. No. After an interesting meal, I headed back to Portales for another trip back into time. The Blackwater Draw Archeological Museum is housed at the Eastern New Mexico University campus. It is open to all with no entrance fee and is the perfect complement to a visit to the Blackwater Draw field site. Here you will find in-depth displays on both the artifacts recovered from the site, as well as the implications the draw had on our understanding of its prehistoric legacy. One centerpiece is a map of North America as it appeared during the Pleistocene era, most commonly referred to as the last ice age. This is when massive glaciers covered most of North America and Northern Europe until they started receding about 15,000 years ago. With much of the Earth's water resources turned to ice, the oceans receded as much as 400 feet, opening a land bridge connecting Eurasia with North America. As temperatures increased and water levels gradually rose, there was a short period of opportunity for human migrations to enter North America through either a coastal route or what is now known as the ice-free corridor between the Great Glaciers. Over time, some descended south, finally finding a paradise in the Clovis area. And this guy makes it look cool to excavate a site. Kind of the Marlboro Man with a brush. For any Indiana Joneses out there, what could be discovered in a visit to this area? The first is that man existed in Blackwater Draw 13,500 years ago, earlier than the discoveries at Folsom, New Mexico a few years prior suggested. And that most of the animals they hunted were now extinct, including the mammoths.
This is an actual mammoth tusk. Just the tip, of course. Whole thing was a lot bigger.
But there's one more mystery that needs to be solved, and it's been a controversial topic even today. The question is this: why did all those large mammal species vanish off the face of the earth so quickly? Were they hunted to extinction by man, or was it due to climate change? In archaeology, like politics, the best answer is most likely a little of both. However, keep in mind that our recent indigenous cultures were stewards of their lands, ensuring steady food supplies. I imagine these could be pretty sharp. The tools unearthed are definitely for hunting, not war. However, two spears on display suggest another angle.
Star Trek.
Science fiction takes elements of reality and turns it into entertainment. The original Star Trek series had an episode which referenced the Folsom spearheads found in New Mexico and donated the spear props to the university.
Believe it or not, they're right here in this museum.
Not the best special effects, but at least it's something my generation can identify with.
It's always great when they can work Star Trek into it.
Along with pottery displays from more recent Aboriginal cultures. And here are the results of upper layer digs that yielded artifacts many would just call junk. The only thing missing are the light beer cans.
Well, the sun's going down and it's a little less windy. It's still windy. It's been windy the whole time I've been here. But hopefully you can at least hear me, because I wanted to give you my thoughts on this campground in this area. I'm at the Oasis State Park campground. It's just outside of Portales, New Mexico, between Portales and Clovis, New Mexico. Very dry, arid, lots of scrub brush, a few cacti and a few trees, but it's relatively flat. You know, there's no mountains around here or anything. It's around a pond, but the pond is man-made. You know, it's got like a little cement walkway around it, and there's nothing really natural about it. It's for fishermen. They come in and they catch stockfish. You can't swim in it, and but you can have a picnic around it. I guess that's okay. But the campground, it's small. There's probably about maybe 20, 30 campsites. This one here, I had to reserve. It was $10 plus the reserve fee, Reserve America, so it was $14 a night. I get a picnic table, a barbecue. There is a vault toilet nearby. There's vault toilets all around, and there is at least a couple of areas that do have showers, which is good, and all the sites seem to have water. But as far as what's there to do here, well, if you don't fish, like me, there is a trail, goes through the dunes. 10 minutes, you basically did the trail. So, to be honest, I wasn't here for the campsite.
I was here for the old bones, and I didn't leave disappointed. There are not many places anywhere in the world where you can observe history uncovered up close, and the discovery of the Clovis culture was a huge step in understanding our past. So here's a call to all you boneheads, science fiction buffs, and followers of ancient cultures, as there's lots to be seen here.
So if you're interested in archaeology or just the history of humankind, you've got to make a visit to the Blackwater Draw. It's totally worth it.
And as I headed out for another adventure, I realized there was one more thing I needed to pass on to my viewers. The Blackwater Draw could really use some help, so come on out to visit if you can, but please also consider a small donation to help them restore the site. I have included the address and contact information here to pass on your support. I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out my others as well. And happy discoveries, everyone.